Hey y'all, this is Nettie Long Poetry coming to the room, coming to the room. It has been a minute since I've been on the scene. Um, but hey, I'm back with another episode for you with They Took My Choice Away Survivor Series. I wanted to take an opportunity to thank those of you who supported me along the way. I just thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for all the encouragement. Thank you for all the survivors that have graced this platform in itself, just to share their story with me. They didn't have to do it. They didn't have to be courageous enough to share so that someone else can be blessed by your testimony. And so I just want to thank you for all of that. I want to take a few minutes just to make sure that I'm actually made public before I put our special guest on, which she is patiently waiting to get on. I always like to start on time and promptly. But yeah, I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to start off and kick off season 4 with y'all today. I know that you guys have been patiently waiting. Um, One second. Uh, Let me add her on before I go start switching things. I want to make sure everything is running smoothly with. Hi, Riza. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Okay, well, we are currently live. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm blessed by the best. I may be persecuted, but not destroyed, you know? But not destroyed. I had gotten that confession and that saying from old time mentor of mine. So I always say it, especially when I'm discouraged. But um, I think that we have to say positive confirmation, affirmations so that, our words line up with our action. So
Of course, of course.
I want to say thank you, first of all, Miss Rita. I'm saying your name correct, am I?
So I use Rissa for short, but you can call me Carissa.
Carissa. Okay, Carissa. Thank you for you come highly recommended actually. My friend David. Every time he feels that there's someone that's ready to share, he, especially a woman, he sends them my way. So I so appreciate him and his dedication to the broadcast. As you know, he and his wife have graced this platform, and I'm just
Yes,
so grateful for them. I love them. They're a powerhouse couple. I love what God did in their lives, especially dealing with trauma and the fact that I wanted to explore what the wife goes through, with someone who or the partner. It doesn't have, it could be the husband, also, but in spite of what the person goes through when they're surviving their trauma, that their partners are also surviving the trauma with them, and we don't often talk about that. So if you ever have an opportunity to kind of go back to any of my episodes, watch Miss Kelly's. It was an awesome and powerful interview. She made us realize a lot of what the partner will go through with their with their partner. So, but I love them. I just wanted to give them a shout out. But let me make sure that I'm actually going public because for some reason it doesn't always transfer that way.
okay.
Um, so I just want a few minutes. Just give me. I need like 2 minutes. I gotta first find me. I love your picture, by the way. The fire was really nice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. And how was your weekend?
It was actually eventful, pretty good. I had a
Okay.
long day today, but I'm very tired.
Okay, hold on. There's a little bit of lag. Hold on.
Pretty good. I had a long day today.
Okay. All right, so now that I'm here, I need to pin the post. Yeah, so right now only I can see it. So now I have to make it public. I have no idea why it does this.
Yeah, I
So
just
now
had someone message me saying they can't see the link.
exactly. Gee. Okay, so now I'm public and you're following me so you can now share it to your page.
Okay.
If you go on
So is it on your, like,
yes.
from your Facebook page?
And I'm gonna try to
Okay.
also let me see if I could add you. Carissa. You see me or see us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now you can share it, and then I would just double check the settings. There goes David. There we go. I knew he was gonna be on here. All right. So I am ready for you. You let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready whenever you are.
Oh God, you sound so calm. All right. I feel like you're ready too.
That's what a
Yeah.
lot of prayer will do, girl. A lot of
Yes.
prayer.
Yes. I feel such a calmness with you. Yeah, I love it. Okay. So let's just do a little bit of an icebreaker. I would like to know a little bit about your childhood, but happy memories. What are some of the happy memories that you have as a child?
So I had a pretty good upbringing, a pretty good childhood. One of the things that, I share with a lot of people, I am one of four on my mom's side. I have two brothers and a sister. Um, my mom, she's always has been very affectionate, very loving mom. She was a single mom for most part, but then she ended up did meeting someone and marrying. So I did have a stepdad that raised me for the majority of my life. But yeah, I had a really good childhood. My mom, we didn't have much, but one thing I can say is that my mother made sure that we never knew that. I never felt like we went without. I was involved in a lot of things growing up, chorus, cheerleading, step, you named it. I was involved in almost everything you can think of. And, from the time I was really, really small, I used to love singing. So I've been singing since I was 5 years old. I started singing in church when I was very, very, very young. Yeah, about five. And then, up until adulthood. Um, I most of the best memories that I can think of is in my childhood growing up. I lived in a neighborhood that was an apartment complex, so I had a lot of friends. We used to play outside. I always joke around and tell my kids now, like, they don't know, like, our time is totally different. We used to stay outside and play outside till the street lights came on, and now the kids nowadays are just on their phones and they don't know, what to do. But, for the most part, I had a good upbringing, a good childhood, a loving mother. And my siblings were very close. I love my siblings dearly.
I think that's wonderful. So I know that you come with a lot of heartaches, a lot of heartbreaks, and thank God you've been able to kind of um, go through the storm, and sometimes and probably had to go back to even revisit some of those storms and those traumas in order for you to be the person who you are today. When did the trauma begin for you?
So, from what I can remember, when I was very young, we used to be at a family member's house a lot. And I was about 4. So at around the age of 4, 4 or 5, um, we used to be at this family member's house, and I remember, there were times where we would stay the night. My mom, she would go to work, or sometimes, even if she just needed like time away, or a break, or you could say, we would be there. And the first thing I remember we were being babysat, and I was in the living room, and there was an uncle who actually he was a bishop, and I remember standing on the side of the couch, and so the couch is here, and I'm on the side, like kind of where the arm is. And no, there was nothing but kids there. I believe it was me and a sibling. So they weren't paying attention. And I remember, my uncle reaching his hand, down into my pants. And that was the first time. It was very quick. Just reached his hand down there and kind of just like nothing happened, just took his hand out. And I remember feeling so confused because I was only 4. And, at that time, I didn't know what was going on. And I feel like because I was so young, I didn't really know like what to say to him, or what to say to anyone else. So, I was quiet about it. And then I remember, I don't remember how long it was from the first time, but I do remember my family member had a guest house in the back of the house. And I remember this guest house, it was unfinished, so there was like no finished walls or anything like that. But I remember it being very dark in there. And I remember my uncle saying, come on, come back here. We're gonna go play a game. And so me being young, I went back there with him, and I remember he pulled his pants down, um and pulled my pants down and sat me on top of him. Now, I there was no penetration or anything like that, but I remember feeling just almost disgusted,
Mhm.
and like I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't say anything to him. And
You got also for people who are tuning in, if this is triggering, I do ask you to step back away, out of the program, and of course you're always able to revisit. I just wanted to put a disclaimer out that we do get, uh, as long as the sharer is willing to share the actions that have happened to her. This is to help also bring awareness that you are not alone if you're out there. Um, and I just wanted to kind of put that out there that we do expose things here. And if it's too much, go ahead and just back out of the program and come back. Um, and Carissa, as long as you're willing to share, the platform is open for you. Okay.
of course, yeah.
Okay. And of course, you were a child. There was just no way that you were going to be able to articulate it. You've never had a conversation with your parents, probably about, inappropriate touching. So a child at your age would not know how to even articulate this. So there was just no possible way. So if you try to, when people ask, well, why didn't you say anything? You're a child. You don't know. And if you don't have these conversations as a parent, and this is why I talk about parent accountability, and we'll get that, we'll get into that.
Mhm.
But it's very important that the parents' sex education, it comes from home first before before a child ever knows about it in school. So I'm a big advocate of making sure that your children are well educated um, about their sex parts and what improper touching is and what's not, and what is inappropriate touching. So, go ahead.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things about what I just shared, ironically, is for a very long period of my life, the second incident, it almost felt as if it was a dream.
Mm.
And I used to ask myself, did that really happen? Um, and I learned later on that that was my body's response of just protecting me from, kind of remembering the real events of what happened, almost dissociation. That's the correct term from it. So I learned that I would disassociate, in certain situations, and that's not the only instance where I disassociated, because sadly for me, it didn't just stop with an uncle. Um, in the very same family member's house, I remember I had a cousin, and me and a sibling were there. We were also probably around 4 or 5 years old. And this instance, I used to feel like it was a dream as well. But again, I'm like, I know that happened to me. I remember, he he would put toothpaste on his, genitals and try to convince me to perform oral sex on him. Now, that instance, I can say I didn't. I said no because I had remembered, what happened to me. And I just, me being so young, I think because of what happened, it just scared me. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And then ironically, fast forward maybe like a year or two later, I remember by that time, I had to be in kindergarten or first grade. And I remember I was probably about, I want to say like 6 years old. And I remember my sibling had a friend, and that friend came to stay the night. And while everyone was sleeping, mind you, I was 6 or 7, probably 6 or 7, and he had to be no older than 13 or 14 years old. And I remember him thinking I was sleeping, but putting his hand under my shirt and kind of just caressing, my chest. That instance, I remember I actually told my mom about that instance. And what was so ironic to me is that the same cousin who would try to get me to perform oral sex on him with the toothpaste, he was there, maybe like the day or so after. And I remember, he chased the kid up the tree, and in my mind I'm like, you know you're chasing him up the tree, but you try to do the same thing to me. So I think that really, it confused me as a child. You know, I will say that I was very, very confused. Um,
Can we just go back? Because you
yes,
said you shared this with your mother.
yes.
What kind of support did you get by your mother when you told her?
So yeah, so that instance, with the young man putting his hand in my shirt,
Mhm.
um, I don't remember exactly what happened. I just know that my family was upset. And then my cousin came over, and then basically he tried to fight the kid or chase the kid up the tree. I do remember my uncle sharing that with my mom. I'll never forget. Me and my sister were in the bathroom one day, and my mom was having a conversation with us, and she was asking us, if anyone ever, touched us, because sadly that same uncle had a history of doing that to multiple family members. And I remember telling my mom, and my mom just crying and sobbing, um, especially because, you know, it's her testimony to tell, but it happened to her as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after telling my mom, I remember, her speaking about kind of bringing it up to another family member who he was married to at the time. And her vividly speaking about how, if we say something, they're not going to believe us. Um, you know, just those things. And for a long time, I chose not to share my trauma because I didn't I didn't want to break my mother's heart. But
We're
I
gonna put a pin in it right there.
okay.
I'm gonna stop right there. I need a minute to process. This is the first time I'm hearing her story. I purposely did not want to hear the story until, or all of it, I should say. She just gave me snippets of it, so I need some time to process. Okay. I'm grateful, right, that you had an opportunity to share with your mom. Most kids will never get that opportunity, right? Um, what saddens me is that in families, we often, because it's our family, we often still protect the perpetrator. We often don't. It's best to just, this will be the last time we ever speak to him. Now we know. Now, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I felt like that's what happened to me. And so I didn't, for a very long time, because I was so young. It was a girl cousin that was molesting me, that I too, when I shared it, and I'm not going to go into detail because, but when I shared it, that the most that happened was, yeah, my dad got upset. He called them because they were in another state, and said we would never see them again. And for 10 years, we didn't. And so that was his way of, protecting me. But we often do that. We often don't find out, because my cousin was also a child herself. You know what I mean? So nobody's thinking about how this person came to be, right? And in your instances, this is an adult uncle who's doing this, and then your mother felt the need. Has it happened to you? And so at least you had a conversation, but there was not enough. What was done, and going forward, like, did you just stop talking to them, or like, what was the, I know you didn't want to share it anymore, and of course
Yeah.
that's the number one reason why, as parents, that no matter what our children tell us, one, we have to believe them,
Yep.
right? And two, we have to give them a safe space for them to be able to talk to us. If we do not give our children access to talk to us, or even create that safe space, where do you think it's going to go? Where do you think that they're going to trust? Who they're going to trust? You leave them no room if all you do is yell at them. You
Yep.
leave them no room if all you do is use them to do X amount of chores around the house, and things that you don't want to do in a home, but you use your kids to do. And if all they feel is being used, or all they feel is, I can't talk to them because they have to walk on eggshells around you, then you're not being productive as a parent, and you're not protecting them. And
Yep.
so we're finding that in Carissa's life, she could not go to her mom because she saw the heartbreak that it took just by telling the truth. And so that puts a specific strain on her as a child, that, oh, I don't ever want to see my mom hurt again. So whatever is going to start happening after that moving forward, there's no safe space because her mom could not handle the news. And so we have to be mindful that our kids are going through things behind our backs, and unfortunately you can't protect them from everyone, and you don't know who you're marrying into, and who they, what kind of, demons are following them, because the devil uses people, you
Yeah.
know and so we cannot be um shocked that this is the world around us. This is it. And he will use family. He will use family to hurt us, destroy a child. The enemy's true design in nature is to um try to abort you if he can. So um this is some heavy stuff, and I'm sorry that you went through that. But I can certainly relate to you because I certainly didn't want to have to tell this again. You know what I mean? When I had to, and I've had two perpetrators in my life, but I grew up around pedophilia. You know what I mean? It's in every church. You talking about he was a bishop? It's in every church. It can be in every church, and if you're not careful, and if people don't come together to actually watch strange behaviors and directly address them, then yeah, it's gonna run rapid in the least likely cases, such as church, that you would think it's not in church. Um, okay, we're gonna go ahead and go on. We're gonna move
Yeah.
on.
I
Um,
I I agree. I agree. Um, one of the things that I hated about the generation that I grew up in was kind of just like the what happens here stays here, like, just that we don't tell our business, or it's almost like it's a secret. And one of the things that I learned, which it allowed me to later, because I'm not gonna say that um I didn't blame her,
sure,
because I know she had nothing to do with the trauma.
sure.
But for a long time, I almost felt like I lost my voice,
Mm,
because once I did bring it up to my mom and I seen that nothing happened after that. We just weren't allowed to go over there anymore. That's kind of what happened. We were no longer around him, but I know that it's sometimes you see that it's generation after generation. And one of the things that I'm grateful for is the resources that we have today, versus kind of what was back then. And I know that it happened to her. She didn't know how to handle it because she didn't have a voice either. But I remember feeling like I just, it didn't matter. And I lost my voice. And I think because of that, later on in life, I remember just feeling like this is gonna be my life. This is just, I felt like I had a target on my back, because it didn't stop. It stopped with, my uncle, but you know, it didn't stop there. And I remember for a while, for a long time, I was okay in the sense of, I didn't have anyone else abusing me. Um, up until maybe about my teenage years. Um, but maybe from like the age of 10 to 13, um, the effects that being
let's talk about it.
abused,
Mm-hmm.
the what it had on me, it was almost detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I developed anxiety, depression, and then also what I feel like with trauma, you have people that everybody responds to trauma in different ways. You know, for me, I was very hypersexual at a young age. And I think that's also something that's not talked about a lot. You know, and I feel like it's because people are ashamed, you know, but it was a result of me being abused, you know, and I remember, you know, from the ages of 10 to 13, just, you know, kind of experimenting in a lot of things. And I'll never forget, I want to say around 12, and there was a neighbor, and he was like like a friend that we had, like myself and my siblings, and we were talking on the back porch. And I remember, you know, in that conversation, it was late and my parents were sleeping. I remember in that conversation, at some point, I was getting ready to go, like, okay, good night, you know. And as I'm standing in the doorway, he kind of forced his way into the kitchen and through the back door. And, you know, he started kissing me. And in that moment, I'm just like, no, like, stop. And I remember feeling so scared because he started to, you know, put his hands down my pants, and I'm begging him, please stop, please stop. And it took me to have to grab a kitchen knife and push it into his chest for him to stop. And he finally stopped, and I remember, you know, him just saying, please don't tell anyone. Please don't tell anyone. You know, and I didn't say anything to anyone. No one knew about that instance. But the hardest thing for me, I think, in all the trauma that I've experienced, the one that's, you know, it's all hurt. It's all, I feel like, has affected me, you know, in multiple ways, you know. And the one I think that really hurt me the worst is, I remember I was 14. Well, excuse me, I was 13 years old, and I met an individual, and I remember this individual at the time, he was 20. And I remember me walking down the street and him kind of like catcalling. And, you know, he was like, oh, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 13. And he was like, oh, I'm gonna wait till you're 18 years old. And after that, the conversation was over. And I remember I would walk by, because I used to walk to the corner store. So I would walk to the store, walk home, and I would see this individual frequently. And I remember, fast forward a year later, I ended up seeing him again. And, you know, he kind of, like, he had a conversation with me, and he was able to convince me to, you know, exchange numbers. So, you know, we talked, and in my mind, by that time, he's 21 and I'm 14. It didn't register to me that, you know, I was being preyed upon. You know, in that age, I remember growing up, you would hear like family members, they would call it, oh, she's just being grown. You're just being fast or grown. And, you know, I remember, like, you know, I continued on a conversation with him for months, until eventually he convinced me to go to his house. And I remember he picked me up, and we went to his house, and, you know, he's just talking to me like, yeah, I got my own place, my own car, and um, we ended up being intimate with each other,
Mhm.
and for years that relationship continued on, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, because I was confused. I would ask myself, if I consented to it the first time, was I still abused? Was it still, was it still a trauma? Um, but I remember multiple instances where he would force me to do things and that I wasn't comfortable with, you know, and it was really hard for me. And I think one of the things that, people don't talk about too much is, we talk about forgiveness, forgiving our abusers,
Mm.
but it was harder for me to forgive myself.
It
And
always.
I think it was so hard for me to forgive myself because I I feel like I took my control back by being promiscuous
Mhm.
in my younger ages.
Mm.
And, you know, I had to forgive myself for the way that I felt about myself. You know, it was hard. It was really, really hard, especially because, you know, I was so confused. I was confused.
So things when we're still a child, because being 14 years old is still a child.
Mhm.
We all know that you do not have the mental capacity of an adult. So you are easily um, manipulated, especially when an adult is over the age of 21 or 21 and older. Um, in the state of New Jersey, where I live, um, a child of 15 years old can consent to an to can consent to sexual relations with anyone. Okay, so and the reason why I know that is that my daughter was 16 years old when she did not know who she her father's her baby's father was 22 years old, and there was nothing I can do as a parent about that because she consented. And so she had no idea his age, but now that's his word over hers. So I had a situation like that happen. But when the child is under the age of 15, um, that is abuse. That is sexual assault. I don't know what it is in the state that you're in, um, but there's just no legal capacity, no mental capacity that a 14-year-old has. Yes, could have you could have said no, um, sure, but you're being groomed. You were being groomed. You were how old when he first encountered you? And he said, "Oh, I'm going to wait
13.
until you're 13." So his eye has been on you since then. So now that you turned 14, now he got a little he didn't want to wait. And so um at 14 years old, to them, to a perpetrator, you're old enough. Um, you've got the body parts of a young woman, and so they don't think about age like that. And they're selfish. Predators are very selfish, um, very disgusting in the way that they think. And so when the flesh gets a hold of them, because it's not just a that's not a normal desire, right? It really isn't. Like he should be attracted to adults, right? But they're not. When they're predators and like that, they're not. And they've given, and it's not just something that it's something that they've developed over time. Pornography is one of the leading reasons why. And so probably as a child, when pornography was not enough, then he started to be, promiscuous himself. And then and now the older women are not giving him probably the time of day, so now he has to shoot a shot with kids, you understand? And so it's a cycle that they go through too. That it's not something that happens overnight, it's something that's developed, and then a monster grows. And so I would I know that you blamed yourself, but for those who are tuning in and who could relate, I certainly could relate. I certainly can relate to everything that you're saying. I certainly can. I understand where you were, because there was a time I even hated any type of attention. I didn't want any type of attention, so I started dressing like a boy. I don't know if that was your story, but I started dressing like a guy. I didn't want the attention. You know, I felt like I was targeted everywhere I went. That's why I was telling you that pedophilia was all around me back then, and it sounds like you're experiencing the same thing. There was a time, yeah. So now now they're being so crafty and hiding in plain sight, but we're doing it more craftily, if I'm saying that right, as opposed to just the way that things were, back in the day, where it was just so prevalent. But nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
Women didn't have voices back then. And so um I when anytime you might have consented to it, but anytime there was something that you had to do that you felt uncomfortable, that you might have said no to, but he made you do it anyway, it was assault. It was assault. So I just don't want the viewers to think that, oh, I went through that and not know. It's assault. It's plain and simple. It's sexual assault. So let's not get confused. Go ahead, Mama.
Yeah. And I know that now, and it took me, honestly, it took me having a daughter, and once becoming an adult and thinking about that situation, like if it were my daughter, how would I feel as a mom? I would consider that assault. And like I said, although the first instance was consensual, but I was groomed. There were a lot of things that I feel like, with men like that, they kind of know what buttons to press with teenage girls, but there were more things that, he would kind of force me to do that I felt more uncomfortable and said no, then yes. And I remember feeling so disgusted with myself. You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like after that, I kind of just started to spiral. There was a point in time where I felt like I was just messed up. I felt like my abuse messed me up so bad mentally, to the point where I felt like I developed a addiction to porn. And sadly,
did he introduce you to that?
so pornography was actually introduced to me at a very young age. That's that. I forgot to mention that. So it was actually a cousin. There was a back then, because the Jerry Springer show, would be wild, but there was like a tape that it was like a special edition or something like that. And I remember a cousin, putting the tape on, and there being like naked women, and then So that same cousin showing me another video, of pornography as well. Um, are you still there?
I am. I had to reset it because I had an alarm that went off, and it muted my mic, and I didn't know how to get out of that. Sorry.
That's okay. You're fine.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so pornography was actually introduced to me earlier on. But
Mhm.
oddly enough, I didn't watch it again until I became a teenager. But that was also because I grew up in an age where the internet was just becoming a big thing, and
Mhm.
um, so I didn't really have access to it like that. But once I became a teenager, I did. I had a cell phone, and I remember, being addicted to pornography and almost feeling confused and so messed up in my mind because I would watch anything. It didn't
Mhm.
matter what it was, what type of pornography it was. I just wanted to watch pornography. And I feel like I just started just engaging in activities that were harmful to myself, but I feel like I was taking back control of my body, not
Mhm.
realizing you know that it was a result of my trauma. And I remember,
Mhm.
fast forward a year later, so I was 15 at the time, and I was in high school, and I did end up becoming pregnant with my oldest son. So I had him at 15.
Mhm.
And I remember when I was pregnant with him, just there being a lot of, you know, negative things said about me, that I wasn't gonna be anything, you know, um, that I was a whore, um, you know, just that I was fast, all of these things. And I remember I started to believe that about myself.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Yes.
so it was so triggering, you know what I'm saying? And I remember I had my son, um, I had him at 15, and it kind of stopped after that. After I had my son, I did calm down. Um, but only I wasn't being promiscuous, but I had a lot of mental issues. I would begin to try to commit suicide, um, engaging in experimenting in drugs, and at that time, growing up, my parents, I would say I grew up in church, but not in God.
Mhm.
So we were like in and out of church. So I didn't really have an outlet. And I think if I had an outlet, it would have been easier for me, you know, to deal with my trauma. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have anyone to go to. I also remember my father, he was in and out of prison, my entire life. And I feel like although the instance of my mom kind of like me telling her and it not going anywhere, although that did make me feel like I didn't have a voice, but I always felt like my father not being in my life played a big, big role in, my trauma, because I always used to feel like, I didn't have a dad to protect me.
Mhm.
I didn't have a father. You were supposed to be there, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And um, so I feel like I searched for
Mhm.
that love in negative ways, you know?
You did. You did. You had. It was like it's that internal connection that a child needs. Um, they see it all around them. You saw it around you. You saw two-parent households. You saw what a father's supposed to look like. You've seen that. You've seen that, and you desired that. So, um, it was detrimental. You would hope that he would have been there to protect you. And yeah, um, that's a natural feeling. There, there's no child that's gonna go without feeling that. That's a natural connection. So I understand that. Um, I had a two-parent household, but I had a father who was not present emotionally. You know, I got pregnant at 15, well, 14, but didn't have her until 15. And it wasn't until after I had her, and he was a pastor. Okay. He just didn't know how to talk to me. He didn't know how to console me. He didn't know. He was upset, at it. And it got to a point that all I wanted to do was find um, him to approve of me in some way. And so I worked up anxieties in me that I had to over whatever I did, whatever I put my hand to do, whatever I put my mind to do, I had to do it two times better than the next person because I just wanted my dad to be proud of me of something. He didn't think I was going to graduate. So I understand when you say, oh, she's not going to go anywhere. She's not going to, be anything. I understand what that felt like. Maybe not so much in the capacity of um people calling you a whore and things like that, but it certainly felt like that's how he looked at me.
Mhm.
He didn't have to say it, but I felt it. um and so yeah, that's going to play tricks on you in your mind in itself, because now you're harboring confessions of others that are saying to you, and you're speaking spirit. I know you probably weren't thinking about it that way
Mhm.
when you were a child, but whatever you start to receive, you start to believe. And so
I agree.
um it takes a, it takes almost a lifetime to understand the true value of yourself when you know who you are in God, when you know who you are in Christ. But it almost, you have to wait until you reach adulthood, it seems like, in order for you to understand all of it, because you're still a child.
Mhm.
You're still not thinking at the capacity of an adult. And why would you? And I'm sorry that these things happen to us. Like, I get so angry at the way um s- uh victims have to wallow in their sorrow, how they, um it's just mind blowing how a simple thing, well, not, it's not simple, how a traumatic victim can go through something, and the resources that they have today, and can transform them in a matter of a year, and now, I know you went through something so horrific that it's like, how do I transform my mind? And so I know you're getting ready to tell us how, but it's like, I know where you were. I know where you were. And it's a slippery slope to climb up from. But what kind of support, maybe at this point, you're pregnant, I mean, you've already had your child, your son. Um, People are saying you're not going to amount to anything, but did you have at least your mom in this instance?
So that's where it's still a little hard because
Okay.
my mom, around the time that I got pregnant with my son, um, she was going through a divorce and she lost her father. So she was dealing with a lot of trauma. You know,
Mhm.
and I also think from me becoming pregnant and her not really knowing how to deal with it, it wasn't handled in the best way. So a lot of my pregnancy, was very traumatic because we didn't see eye to eye. And we would get in the worst arguments, and she would say hurtful things, which she since has apologized. We've talked. I forgive. My mom is a completely different person today. She serves God, and I thank God for her and the
Amen. Amen.
transformation that He's done in her life. Um,
Amen.
but I didn't really have that support. And I think because my mom at that time was going through a divorce and she was grieving, now she's trying to figure out life and being a single mother, and how to handle things where um, she kind of, after I had my son, I believe because her parents were very strict, she didn't want to be too strict with us, so she let go of the reins.
Mhm.
And in her doing that, if you're a teenager and your parents give you an inch, you're going to take a mile,
Of course.
you know? So, um, I kept on in destructive behavior. Um, After I had my son, my mom, I always say I had my son at 15, but my mom really raised him until that maybe I was like 17. She was the because I was a baby having a baby. She supported me financially and she was there and helping me take care of him, you
Good.
know. Um, but I didn't know how to be a mom at that age, and I was still dealing with my own traumas. So, although, during my pregnancy and a short while after, I calmed down, but I think by the time I was 16, I, kind of, because I hadn't dealt with my trauma,
Sure.
I kind of just started back up again. And I remember that's when, I started to become confused about my sexuality.
Mm.
And at one point, I call it experimenting or whatnot, but I experimented and I had sexual relations with women.
Mm.
um and in that, I remember feeling so shameful because, again, I grew up in a household where we were in church but not in God, if that makes any sense. So it's like I knew better, you know, and it didn't stop there because um I don't I haven't shared it with people because I feel like God will, when it's time for you to share your
Sure.
testimony, when it's time for you to share something, then that's when God will allow you to. Um, and it was actually really, really hard for me
Mm.
because that was a secret that I held on to for such a long time. My mother knew about it, my siblings knew about it. My mom didn't handle it in the best way. And, I struggled with that for a long time. So what started with experimenting, you know, then I became confused. And at that time I was considering myself as bisexual. Um, you know, then later on, maybe fast forward a couple years later, I ended up meeting my husband. And one of the things I can say is
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for that man because even though I feel like my mom, she taught me things in life. I feel like my husband taught me so much. Um, and he became my outlet. There was a lot of things that I didn't tell my parents or well, my mom that I shared with him.
Mhm.
And so I have to say that I'm just grateful for him because I met my husband at 17. I did end up, getting pregnant at 17, almost 18 with my second child with my husband. And we've been together for 13 years today, married 10. So I'm definitely grateful for him because I feel like he's been a big part of teaching me a lot of things, about myself, you know. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to share that. And
I
so just
think I think that's beautiful. Actually, I'd like to expound on that. So, for those of you who are viewing this, I'm going to give props and flowers to the husbands out there who do support and are supportive of their wives, who are there emotionally for them. That is that you guys are God's gem that He hides. He knows. God knew who you needed, Mama. He knew who you needed. And you are supposed to learn from your husband. He is supposed to be the teacher. He is supposed to be teaching you. And yeah, it's a and both y'all I think what's great about marriage is when it's godly and it's whole and it's oh my God, supportive that you get to learn from each other and you get to experience what true love is, how God loves. So God knew what you needed, Ma. He
mm,
knew what you needed in order for you to also, continue actually start your journey for healing. And yeah, you guys didn't get it right, maybe the way God intended to at first, but it's not how we start, it's how we finish, you know? Um, so I'm happy that you are at this point in your life that you have someone that you have a partner in this, and this partnership is going to be very important, even for you as you tell your story, you know. And so to have a husband who is emotionally available, they don't come that often.
yeah.
God is still making mine, I'm sure. Because he knows I need somebody emotionally available, you know. As someone who's patient, who's kind, those are all attributes of a godly man. And so I'm so happy that we're here, that we've gotten to the point where you are okay, you have a partnership that God has blessed. So do you want to share more on that?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I am one of the many reasons why I am also so grateful, to have the partner that I do have, um,
Mm,
is because being that I've went through so much trauma,
mm.
I know that I haven't been the easiest person to deal with,
Come on, tell the truth. Let's go. Shame
you
the
know?
devil. Yeah. Huh?
And um I feel like a lot of my trauma came out in my later adult years after I was married. And um I carried
Mhm.
a lot of guilt because I feel like he got the blunt of it, if that makes any
It
sense.
does.
I didn't I feel like I had no one else to take it out on, or, no one to go to, no one to talk to. So, I used to be a very, very, very angry, angry individual. Super, super angry. And I'm so grateful that he's just been by my side, you know, throughout this whole time, because he could have said, "Oh, this is too much.
Could
I'm
call you
done.
crazy.
Yeah." He could have walked out on me a long time ago, Um, especially because when I did meet him, um now my oldest son is 15 and he has a different father, and then I have 3 kids with my husband. But when I did meet my husband, I was freshly out of a relationship with my son's father, who was physically abusive. So I was used to that type of relationship, and I brought that into my next relationship. So early on in our relationship, I was very abusive to my husband, both
Now, were you
both
verbally abusive or were you physical, or was it
both
both?
verbally and physically. um More verbally than physically, but there were a few instances where I was also physically abusive. And then, of course, as we got older, you know i I realized it was wrong, and I realized what I was doing. So of course I was no longer physically abusive to him, but there were times that I was verbally abusive, and it was I had put a wall up, because there was a big part of me that felt like I had to protect myself, because no one else protected me through my trauma, through everything that I've been through. I had to protect myself, and I felt like, I can't trust anyone. And that's also a big part, is the trust. My I had trust issues for a very long time.
Hmm. May I ask, okay, is the relationship with the 21-year-old, did you have a child with him? Did you say that?
No, I did
Okay,
not.
this was somebody
Yeah.
else. Now, was he roughly your age or?
My son's father.
Yes.
So I was 15 and he was 17.
Okay, just a little bit
Yeah.
older. All right.
Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to trying to connect the timeline here. All right. Um, okay, and that became abusive. So was he abusive to you, or you said he was abusive to you, right? The first
My son's father,
your
yes.
son's
He was
father.
he was physically abusive.
Got
Physically and verbally, but
it. Okay.
yeah.
And so anytime a person becomes physical, it's really to control the person. It's
Mm.
really to try to wake the person up and control them in a way that they become submissive. So um oh, I'm just so sorry. All this you've been through a lot. So first of all, it takes courage to admit that you were the abuser.
Mhm.
So um That, that that's a hard pill to swallow, to even to admit. And so thank you for being vulnerable and being able to share that. Not everybody takes accountability,
Mhm.
you know. I think it's important. Accountability has to be important in order for you to ever to move on to the next step of healing. You have to recognize what it is that you're doing. So if you're a person that doesn't, like, oh no, have all these a million excuses as to why you are the way you are, then you haven't taken accountability yet. You're still using excuses to continue the bad behavior. You recognize it well enough to know that it's bad behavior, but you're giving excuses as to why you're feeding it.
Mm.
So big ups to you, girl, because that takes a lot of courage to do. Um, so what would you want the viewers to know? besides it being bad behavior, on how if they are um, the abuser because of all the trauma that they've been through, and realizing that there are times where we get a moral compass and we say, I don't want to be this way, but then you don't change. What would you tell that viewer on the way that you got out of being abusive?
I think that you really just have to be self-aware, um, in the sense of knowing, instead of, like you said, taking accountability and knowing why you're doing these things, you know? Um, why are you so angry? To the instance or the result where you're becoming physical,
Hmm.
and there's the saying that hurt people,
Hmm.
you know? And I think, again, it takes a lot of emotional intelligence and being aware of your emotions, and realizing what you're doing, and kind of, like you said, having that moral compass to say, if I'm a human and someone hurt me, this person is also a human, you know?
Hmm.
So they deserve the same love and respect, and they don't deserve the abuse. So I think that accountability is very, very important, but also just being self-aware. And when you know that you have been through trauma, kind of just trying to dig deep and search and find out more about yourself on what your triggers are,
Hmm.
or why you're doing these things, and taking the necessary steps to healing and getting better, so that way you're no longer reacting in that way.
Truly, I believe that um, mm, that most people who have been traumatized absolutely need therapy,
Hmm.
um, because their thoughts pick away at them all throughout the day, um, all throughout the night. That's how anxiety gets created, and lack of sleep. Um, um, just lack of everything, not being able to function really without having someone help you, kind of like help you get to the point where you start to become accountable. Sometimes people just need that help, and I know I could not be who I am today without it. And I know that even going to the right church, that was important as an adult, right?
Hmm.
And being connected with my family, my church family, was very important because I needed the support. I needed the support of single women. I needed the support of women, successful women, who were successfully single and also raising children. Like, I needed to be around people to help me. First of all, stay focused. Secondly, just to kind of stay out of trouble, because when a person has too much time, that's where they get the most in trouble. And
Yeah.
so like, yeah, I was constantly having to stay active, and I wanted to be a part of everything. I know my kids, when they was growing up, like, we were going to church 3 times in a, three services on Sunday, then there's Wednesday night service, and then I start working at the church, and it was like, I'm like, I lived and slept and breathed the church. And so
Yeah.
I was involved in theater, and then I was involved in praise and worship, playing the drums at the church. Like, I was very, very actively involved, and I wanted just to be part of everything. Whatever they asked me to do, yeah, I do it. I just needed to be, I needed to stay focused, because I was a person that was, um, very promiscuous, at a young age. And then I've got three children later. And, I wanted to change that perception of me. When you go to church as an adult, you're not always accepted by the women who are married.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I didn't know where I fit. So it was just my family, and then whatever I was involved in church. And then as years have went on, I'm being accepted everywhere because I've displayed some characteristics that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And so why am I here? I'm just saying to say that I needed a support, whatever that support system is, to help me start to renew my mind. And then I can really start hearing the word really penetrate, my ears, so that I'm hearing like I've never heard before. I'm trusting in the word more because I'm seeing it manifest around people that I love now. You know what I mean? Now there's a support system going back and forth. And so for a long time, that was great. That was what I needed. That was how I was able to cope with depression and all of that. Like, not realizing that it's a direct connection to God trying to restore me. But
Mhm.
I'm saying all that to say, but sometimes that's not always enough, because when the bigger trauma happens, now,
Mhm.
how do you correlate what I went through? Married the love of my life, and
Mhm.
then finding out that he developed a taste for being a pedophile. So how do you explain that when he came out of the church? You understand what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And so I didn't know how to relate anymore. I didn't know like how to deal with that trauma, because this I'm not how do I get that? He came from church. He
Mhm.
came from being a godly man. And so I had to mourn him like a loss. Like, I'm not gonna go into it because you're just gonna have to follow me to listen to look at all the videos that I've done about it. But I had to be a parent and be accountable. And just because I was going through my own stuff, that I had to make sure that my kids were good.
Mhm.
I had to make sure, okay, there's no way that I can do this without some sort of therapy. At this point, I'm starting to see the effects of therapy. Years, it took years. It takes years. So when you said, like, I think you mentioned something about, for so many years, I shared the blame of all the mistakes that I've made, that you're gonna,
Yeah.
if you don't deal with them,
Yep. Mhm.
you're absolutely gonna. And so you need help digesting your own thoughts that tried to kill you. You said you wanted, you were so depressed that you also attempted to kill yourself. I
Mhm.
understand how that feels, because when that family trauma happened at my adulthood, I wanted to kill myself, because how in the world was I a victim of molestation, and I married a pedophile, and then he turned around and did that to our kids? So explain to me, how does a mother live through that? you
Mhm.
know and
Mhm.
so trauma will take you all the way to the end.
Mhm.
If you let it, if you allow it, you know but you have to fight it. And I'm here to tell you that it is a mental struggle. You
Mhm.
will or could develop mental disabilities,
Mhm.
but you're not incapable. With God, you're not incapable of being able to defeat them. It was never meant to. It's meant to destroy you, but it can't kill you unless you
Mhm.
let it. And so he's so amazing. He's so amazing because he has tools to help us cope through things, and
Mhm.
platforms, not just such as mine, but platforms to help you get mentally stable. And so you have to really attack so you have to go back and address the little girl in you. And I know that you shared with me that you haven't done therapy yet. right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I hope it is something, because you still have probably things in your life that you're good, that you're able to tell your story, but um, there's always some fine tuning. But I recommend a therapist that is the same faith base as you.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree.
yes, and they're out there.
Mhm.
I have one in particular. If you need her, she does take insurance, and so you just let me know. But I think it's also important that if you don't do therapy, you have some sort of mentorship. I think every male and every female needs some sort of mentor, to make sure that they hold yourself accountable, because we don't have it all together. We don't
Mhm.
always have all the answers, you know. But I'd like you to share some more on, okay, you have the moral support that you have with your husband. And
Mhm.
how are you as a mother, now that you have a supporting husband, you have your unit, like, the way that God intended? How is your family and how is your motherhood?
So my kids are my everything, of course.
Mhm.
I was a young mother, teenager mother. I had one at 15, one at 18, and by the time I was 22, I had four.
Mhm.
So
Hey, young
young mom,
mom. Mhm.
young mom. Um, but I became very overprotective of my children, but also having conversations with them that my parents didn't have with me.
Mhm.
Uh,
Okay.
so that way, you know, hopefully it could prevent, a situation from happening.
Mhm.
I'm also very careful about, I've always been very careful about who I allow my children to be around.
Mhm.
Um, there was, and it wasn't anything personal, but
Right.
um, my mother is probably my mother and my mother-in-law are the only ones who have ever babysat my children. My
Mhm.
kids know that, now I have preteens and a teenager that, I love them, but I don't allow them to have sleepovers.
And you
You know,
should. Mhm.
I don't. Um, and I don't even allow, anyone else's child to sleep at my home, you
Mhm.
know? Um, just for the simple fact of protecting both my children, and that child in itself,
Well,
another
you
child.
just never know what the child has been exposed to,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
It's not even
Yeah.
so much to protect, like, well, your family's, what do you call that? Like, um, what am I trying to say? Your reputation, but it was
Yeah.
more so you don't know what their child is exposed to. That would
Hmm.
also expose to your children. So that's the number reason why I didn't do it. Um,
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
you, yeah.
And I definitely agree with that as well because I've heard plenty of stories of younger kids that, they were abused and then they experiment on other children.
Yeah.
So I've still to this day, there's no one is allowed to spend the night at my children's home. I feel like I, there in this generation, a lot of kids have a lot of freedom. And I wouldn't say that I'm super strict on my kids, but I would say that I am a parent that is very aware of what's going on in their lives, and I make sure I'm always talking to them, make sure that they're educated. And I remember you saying earlier it is how you feel it's important to speak about, body parts. I've had those conversations with my both my sons and my daughters. You
Mhm.
know, um, one of the things that I am grateful for is one. I take pride in not allowing my trauma to affect how I parent my kids.
Boom.
And
Let's talk about that.
yeah, and
Hmm.
I feel it's so important to work to break generational curses.
Yes.
You know, I had to tell the enemy it stops with me. My
Hmm.
kids, you know, are not gonna experience what I experienced, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's super, 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 super important.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and just having those conversations with your kids, but also, you know, I've told my kids plenty of times, like, I love you, I'm sorry, I know you want to do this, but the answer is no, you know, and they understand.
Good.
They understand. Yeah.
Good. One of the things that my kids used to tell me is, especially after the husband trauma, was that not everybody is like such and such. Um, Not everybody's gonna is out to hurt us. And I said, I know, I understand that. It's just not a risk I'm willing to take.
Yep, I agree.
You know. So I had a lot of, upset, because at this point they're, at the time that they were teenagers, and so a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff happened. You're just gonna have to catch the replays. But you know, I know the enemy had an assignment, and I know that he was trying to be very successful in that assignment. But because of who I am, and because who I know I am in Christ, you know, there was just no way I was going to allow him to win. So it really is a choice to want to fight. It's a choice that you have to make with your life. For those of you who are listening, who may not understand the terminologies that we're using right now, it is a choice. You have to choose you. You cannot. You have to choose you. You have to choose yourself sometimes in order for you to be able to. You have to learn how to love yourself. You have to learn how to forgive yourself. And I know I'd like to talk about that with you, Carissa, because I know you said that you had to forgive yourself. So how did you get to a point in your life where I I I need to forgive myself? Because really, if you can't forgive yourself, how can you forgive anybody else who sinned against you? How else can you, because a form of forgiveness is really loving yourself, you know.
Hmm.
How can you love your children effectively when you're holding unforgiveness for yourself?
Yeah. So I got to a point where I did realize I needed to forgive myself because I realized the bondage that I had
Mm.
on my life. And kind of, you know, I was the only one holding myself back from beginning my healing journey, you
Mhm.
know, because I hadn't forgave myself, you know, but once I realized, you know, it's not my fault
Mm.
that what happened to me,
Right.
you know, I couldn't control what, you know, these individuals, what was in their mind.
Mhm.
You know, and also again, just being self-aware that a lot of the things that I did as a
Right.
result of my trauma was because of my trauma.
Mhm.
And I didn't know any better, you know? I didn't have anyone to tell me, "Hey, do you know that you're doing this because of trauma? This is your trauma response." You
Mhm.
know? Um so that's when I realized if I truly want to heal, you know, yes, I have to forgive my abusers, but I have to forgive myself, you know, for how hard I was on myself, for the things that I thought about myself, you know. I
Mm.
think that was super, super important. It's detrimental to my healing journey.
So one of the things um, in my healing journey that I learned, that I often said I couldn't forgive my husband, right? And so what was important to hear and to know that right now you just need to worry about forgiving yourself,
Mhm.
right? Learn how to forgive yourself. And the and it's God will change our hearts. You know what I mean? Allow God to change our heart about, because when you get to a point where you're so whole in God that all that other stuff that happens to you, it's like it's in the background. It's no longer affecting us in a way that is making us, battle with anything, battle depression or battle our emotions or anything. It's just in the background. And so I believe that the perpetrator needs to seek forgiveness for God and allow
Mhm.
that to be his cup, all right, his or her cup. And
Mhm.
then, of course, as God is molding me and shaping me into the person I'm supposed to be during this healing journey, and as I'm healing, that'll come. It's not something that needs to be right away. God demands it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I think God, you got to allow God to just change your heart because our heart is hardened by the things that happen to us. And so, what we do when a king's heart is hardened, he asks us to pray. He asked the woman to pray for his heart, that God softens his heart. So it's the same way with us
Mhm.
when we're dealing with trauma. God deals with us. He may deal with us all individually, but how he loves us is all the same, you know? And so that's what I learned. That
You know,
the
I
forgiveness is for me. You feel
you
me?
you say that, and I resonate with that so much, especially um there's a saying um that I forget where I've heard it, but when in forgiveness, like
Mhm.
you said, it's important that we do go to God, because when we start praying to God, a lot of times you pray to God and you don't realize that you might come to him for one thing about a specific person. Say if it's someone who hurt you, or oh God, and you might say, God, change that person, or God, do this to this person or that person. But prayer will actually change how you see that person, how you
Yep.
deal with that person.
That's you got it.
And I think that the term softening your heart,
Mhm.
it just hits it right on the head. It's true. God will truly soften your heart. It's crazy, because I was harder on myself
Mhm.
for my trauma than I was on my abusers.
Mhm.
Because I did get to a point where I realized, there's a Bible verse that says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and
And
blood,
blood. Yeah.
but against the principalities of this world." And
Right.
and I realized, it's not that person; it's the spirit in them. You
Come
know,
on.
maybe that person was abused.
Mhm.
Like you said, that person now has to seek forgiveness from
Mhm.
God. And so I knew that I had to forgive them, but um I think that's why, to me, telling my story was so important, because I
Mhm.
know that there were a lot of things that I didn't realize. You think you're healed,
Right.
right? You think you're healed. Even if you try to handle it in your own way, you're like, okay, I'm over this, but really we're just shoving it down inside and not dealing with it.
Yeah,
You
because
know?
yeah,
And
we're distracted.
um yeah, and I know that this is the beginning. This is only the beginning for
That's
me,
right. That's right.
because I feel in my heart of hearts, that God is it this is boom, you're right on the path of your healing journey. So that way, he can use me where he wants to use me, you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Um one of the things in my healing journey and just all throughout throughout my life, that I can say that truly, even in times where, if I wanted to take my life because of things that I've been through, or, I felt triggered in a situation, but one of the biggest things that I can say that has kept me grounded is worship.
Mm.
And my worship to God. I can be feeling the worst, and I will go sit in my car and cry my eyes out with snot in my nose and just worship and sing and cry out to God. You know, and I know earlier on I talked about how, my father wasn't in my life, and I felt like that, hurt me, and I feel like it played a big part in my trauma as well. But the closer that I get to God, we have our earthly father, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but the closer I get to God, the more I learn, like, okay, you have your earthly father, but I have my heavenly father, and he's all that I need. So although my father, my biological father has not been there, God has been there with me throughout my trauma the entire time, you know, and
He
and
is the father
and
of the fatherless. Yes.
and although I would say before, I would say, why me? That was the big question. Why me? But now I'm learning to say, instead of why me, okay, God, this happened. What are you trying to show me? How
Mhm.
are you going to use this storm in my life?
Mhm.
You know, where is this going to take me? You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
we go through things, and we're so quick to pray and ask God to take us out of the storm, and
Mhm.
instead of asking God, you know, what are you trying to show me from this? And I do believe that there is a purpose for my life. And although, it's sad that I went through what I went through, and it hurts that I went through what I went through, but I know that there's always a bigger purpose,
Mhm.
you know? And yeah, I just think that's so important. God has been the biggest thing in my life right now. Well,
Mhm.
he's played the biggest role in my life and in my healing journey,
Mhm.
and I'm so grateful, because I will say that up until maybe 2 years ago,
Mhm.
um, you know, like I said earlier, I always grew up in and out of church, um, but not in God.
Mhm.
And, I started going to the church I go to now, the Encounter Church in Newport Richey. But ever since I've been in the Encounter Church, I feel like um, I have such a support system like I've never had before. I feel like I'm surrounded by so many people who just love and care about, my family. And I feel like God has opened so many doors, you know what I'm saying? And given me and my family so many resources, you know, and I, like I said, I feel like everything is for a purpose,
Mhm.
even down to me talking to you today, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm so grateful for them, because if it wasn't for me walking in those doors, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet you today, you know? So I'm
Girl, you're making
super
me
grateful.
cry. Jeez. Let me tell you something about Encounter. What was the church called again?
The Encounter
Encounter
Church.
Church, and that's where David and Kelly go, right?
Yes.
They're
Hmm.
pastors of. Okay, or assistant pastors. Let me tell you something about them. I mean, the support that that church offers their members, it's it's unmatched, I think. It's unmatched. The mental support that they offer their members, it's unmatched. I'm gonna come and visit you guys. I keep
You
saying
should.
it.
You
I keep
should.
saying it. But I just want to sit in the presence of that church because the amount of support that I hear and how they supported uh um the Torreses. I mean the journey that they're on, the support that they get from the church and its members. I'm sorry, it's unmatched. So I'm giving you guys a shout out. Um, I can't. You're where you're supposed to be. Your life depends on where you go to church, where you're
Mm,
planted, where your feet is planted, where your family is planted, and you're going to see the fruits of that. Geez, I just I can't. Man, I know that church is God sent. When you think about it, there's church every corner you stop at. On my street alone,
mhm.
I got a church at the end of my street and a church behind my street. Like, there's churches everywhere, but are they rooted in the things of God? Are they rooted to really help the people, their communities, the mental state? That there's not too many churches that even want to touch the mental state of people, let alone,
Mhm.
because I believe with therapy, there's also biblical standards that you can stand on as well. So I don't understand why they don't go hand in hand. Um, a lot of church members will have people who are in the mental health, and so easily to be able to cross over with that. I don't understand it, but God knows, what churches are willing to stand up against mental health,
Yeah.
um
Mhm.
and to be a part of being able to be equipped to help people of mental, you know um disadvantages and disabled. So I just love hearing about y'all church. I think there's so much more I'd like to say, but um real quick, who is your spiritual support system? And then what can you tell our viewers about your coping mechanisms? How did you cope with your trauma?
So I would say that my pastors are definitely my spiritual support system. My senior pastor, Jonathan Hidalgo, and his wife, Amarilis, they've been, my spiritual
God
support.
bless.
Also, Pastor David Torres and Kelly Torres. Um, I just want to say, um, my pastor David, he doesn't know. I don't think I've told him,
Mhm.
but he's actually the reason why um I'm doing this. He doesn't know that his story is actually what gave me the courage to share my story, you know? So I'm so grateful for him.
For the viewers that are viewing the replay, when you're catching this replay, you have to understand the reason why I choose to do this. I choose to do this because I didn't have examples when I was growing up of how I could learn, more about what I went through. I do this so that somebody else has an example, that somebody else is being inspired to write that book, to write into their journal, to help them start a healing journey. Sometimes you have to go through a process in your mind that you're actually going to start a healing journey as opposed to just dwelling in your trauma. And so it's important to share people's stories. It's important to give an outlet for people who are willing to be vulnerable and share the story as detailed, as intimate, or as secretive as it has to be, because you're not alone. You're not alone. the things that have happened to me as a child carried me all the way through my adulthood, who that was conforming me in a way. And now I've got reasons and understand I now understand that it's a direct correlation to the abuse that I endured as a child. It unlocks of different levels in a child that shouldn't be unlocked, you
Mm,
know. And unfortunately, the way that God designed sex, it is pleasurable. And
mm,
so when I was being molested, I didn't correlate that to being violent or being hurt in a way that seemed violent. And
mm,
so it felt good. And
mm,
so I didn't know that it was wrong. I just
mm,
knew it was our little secret. And
mm,
so I have a poem. I'm called Nettie Long Poetry for a reason. It's not a show name. It is not the stage name. It really is. Out of my trauma and out of my pain with my ex-husband, um, I morphed into a poet. So a lot of this happened to be, like just my thoughts on paper and but it came out poetically. And so God change us from glory to glory. And
mm,
so I might have been, a preacher's kid. And then the next glory was I was a praise and worship leader. And then the next glory was this poet that I am forever. But he's gonna change us from glory to glory to glory. And I'm just gonna receive it. And so that's who I am today. Hopefully an author by next year. And but I'm allowing God to just matter of fact, I'm taking life slow because I was such on a fast pace because I overworked myself. I overcompensated by being the best valued, at work. I was, I hit at work. That's where, I felt the best appreciated, even though you don't get appreciated at work. But I felt like having awards and gaining I got awards all over the place here, of goals and targets that I hit because I overcompensated, because that's how I cope. That's how I cope. So how did you
mhm.
cope? I
So
mean,
for me, I think through music is how I coped. Even in my teenage years, it's always been through music. Of course, there was a time before I was serving God that I would write music and I would record music in the studio and stuff, um, just to take my mind off of things. But it's crazy because I've had opportunities to like further my music career, and I always said no.
mm-hmm,
And the reason why I said no is because there was a big, huge part of me that knew that if I wasn't doing it for God, that
mm,
I there was no way that I was doing it for the world.
right.
Um, so I think that I use music as a distraction.
Mm-hmm,
Now, I also can looking back can see I just kept myself busy
mm-hmm.
in being a parent.
Okay.
So as long as I was cleaning or doing something with my kids, or where I didn't have to think about the things that be in my thoughts,
Mm-hmm,
so to speak. That's how I would cope with the
mm-hmm,
things that I was dealing with. um Now I could say I use worship and just falling to my knees and going to my secret place and just talking to God, because I feel like sometimes
mm-hmm,
when we want to vent, right? When you have I believe that's why God created therapists. I'm not against therapy. I do believe that people should seek therapy. And that's also my next step in my journey as well. Um So I'm definitely not against therapy, but I feel like there's times where you need to speak to a therapist, but there's times that you need to speak to the therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like God is the ultimate therapist. I feel like, you can say things in prayer to God that you can't say to your family, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, because they love you and they don't want to see you hurt. So there are times where, I felt like I just needed to just let my heart out. And I know I can't tell it to my mom or tell it to my husband because I don't want to overwhelm them, because I know they love me and they care about me and they don't want to see me hurting. You know what I'm saying? So I fall on my knees, and I just go to God, and I make sure that, I talk to him when I'm in those moments, and I feel like that is so important to me.
That's awesome. Girl, you gave us a lot to think about. I'm so happy that you decided that you wanted to share your story with me, and with the viewers that are on today. We ask that you share it. You share the this episode so that it could be a blessing to someone else. Um, I know that I couldn't do it without the stories. I couldn't do it without with people that were willing to want to share. Um, I think one of the most important things that I care about is your mental health and the capacity of it, and to make sure that you're able to share. And so I hope I wasn't too. I don't feel like I was a stickler. I just wanted to make sure that you was good,
Mhm.
to be able to share, and then I just want to know how much of it you were willing to share. And so she gave me some bullet points. And I love that. I, I appreciate her for that. And we wanted to stick to the time because I just knew it was going to be a 2 hour special. But I'm so excited with what God's getting ready to do in her life. It's always just the start, the beginning when you do it here. God's going to elevate her. Um, Exceedingly above what she could even think right now. She has no idea, but God knows. And so I thank you, God, for just trying to be the vessel. And stay tuned to our next month. We have another episode of another trauma for sexual assault. So tune into that. I do them once a month. Today was the kickoff of season 4, so I thank you. Um, and is there anything you'd like to leave with us, as we close?
So I just want to say to you, I thank you for, this opportunity. Um, what you're doing is beautiful, and I truly pray that, God, this is a ministry, and I pray that God blesses your ministry and, grows your ministry. And to anyone that may be watching, one of the things that I want to say, if you've gone through something similar, I know that this type of platform is not for everyone. Um, but even if it's just you sharing your story with someone who, you can trust, I highly recommend that. And I think that, you know, I pray that this touches your heart. I pray that this gives someone the courage to speak up and speak out, and, also be in the direction to their healing journey as well.
Hmm. Amen. Well, this is just the close of the episode, but not the close of They Took My Choice Away Survivor series. So thank you for tuning in. God bless you. Good night. Just stay on for a second.
Okay.